Oh, looks like there's some people watching. So I'm here a little early, but so maybe I'll wait till 5 to introduce myself. I'm glad you're here. This is my studio. It's raining here in Philadelphia, but still light out at 5 o'clock, so things are shifting, seasons changing. We've got 2 more minutes, so hopefully I was just checking to make sure you guys can see and the light is enough. Maybe that's a little better. I'll bring you closer. So we're almost at 5 o'clock. Thanks, those of you who are here. And I just want to wait till 5 before I jump in. If you have questions, this is a sort of interactive thing. So please feel free to type in your questions and I can answer them as I'm going along. I'll try to pay attention to the screen at the same time as I'm talking. Yeah, so the comments are there and I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining me. This is the Rittenhouse 5 o'clock club. Every week there's some interesting artists talking about what they do. And if you miss the live version, they go on the YouTube channel. So there's always a chance to see it if you miss it live. All right, so it's 5. I'm going to get started. Welcome, those of you who've been hearing me talk. My name is Colleen Rudolf, and I am an artist working in Philadelphia. I've been working towards the Rittenhouse Fine Art Show that's happening in June. It's the weekend, the June 4th, 5th, and 6th. And so this work that I'm going to show you tonight is what, part of the work that I'll be showing hopefully in June. It looks like we'll be able to have it in real life. So anyways, this is my studio. And I'm gonna move the phone around maybe. Oh, there we go. There's some people. So anyways, glad you're here. And I'm just gonna I'll do an introduction and then a little just sort of process of how I work. Oh, there's Diane. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming, everyone. I wish I could see you, but this will have to do. So, hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. So, okay, what I have here, I promised a grizzly head, and I've been working on this one. I think you can kind of see it. I can move it a little closer. So this is kind of what I've got so far, and it is it's not totally done, but it's kind of, it's on its way there. And this is several hours, many hours of work. So today what I was going to explain is how I get here. So first off, I work in water-based clay. And those of you who are familiar, there's water-based clay and there's also oil-based clay. Water is softened the water-based clay uses water to get soft. The oil, you kind of have to heat with your hands or sometimes put it under a light for it to get malleable. Water-based clay, you have to keep wet if you want to work it still. So that's something I have to wrap this guy every time I'm done working on him so that the next time I come back, he's still wet. So I can show you what I like about water-based clay is that it actually, you can recycle it. So I'll take you on a little adventure. Let's see if I can turn the screen. So over here I have, this is water-based clay that I'm rehydrating. When a sculpture, I'm done with it, it'll dry out. I let the clay dry out, and then when I need the clay, I will start to rehydrate it. And so that's it. You can see it's really too wet at this point to work with. So there is something called a plaster bat, and it's just plaster that I've cast in this convenient rectangle. And so I've set out some clay earlier, and it's getting there. It's still what you want. Like, I don't want it to stick to my hands. Like, that means to me it's a little too wet still. But this stuff is coming along, and you'll see it peels off nicely. If it's too wet, it'll stick. So this is clay that I set out earlier, but I love that you can recycle the clay. And then I come over here, and when I start working, I usually have an armature of some kind. This one is used for heads, and you can kind of see this will help, these things will help the clay stay. It'll give it some support. Essentially, that's what an armature is support. I'm just seeing a question here, is that whole bare head clay? So no, I mean, this is a lot of clay, but I did start with an armature because it needs, I mean, this bare head is a pretty solid form, but if, this nose could potentially fall off if it weren't supported. Yes, and the armature I do make myself. It's stuff, nothing crazy. This stuff is available at the plumbing department in a hardware store, usually hose clamps, and I use galvanized steel or galvanized pipe because it's going to have water, so I don't want it to rust. And then this is just armature wire, and I stuck this, kind of helps keep it supported. Essentially, that's what an armature is a way of supporting your clay. The thing is, I can't fire this clay. I have to make a mold of it. So I also work in clay where I fire it, but that means there can't be any armature in it. So like, for instance, here's another little bear study I did, but he's hollow because he'll go into the kiln. And there's different considerations depending if you're going to put it in a kiln and oh, hi Diane, nice, I'm glad, thanks for coming, you guys. So this guy I will make a mold of, which is how for the larger sculptures I usually do it. And I have this little mold that I just brought over as a way to show you. This is a mold of a hand that I had. You can kind of see. But this is called a poured rubber mold. And so this same process, this is rubber, it's flexible, so I'm able, with undercut areas or complicated forms, I'm able to pull it out without breaking the piece. And then this supported by a plaster mother mold, it's called. So this sculpture, once it's done, will have that same mold around it, which will allow me to cast it in plaster, or it could potentially then be cast in bronze if I wanted it to be. So, molds allow for a little bit more flexibility, whereas like this guy will only ever be ceramic clay. So that's kind of a little outline of the process. And I guess I went kind of quickly, but I'm kind of trying to pay attention to the comments here, but I don't see any questions. So what I'll show you now, let me do another switch. There I am again. And so I'm going to put this here, and I really sped through that whole thing. So feel free, if you have questions, if the water-based clay sits for a long time, does it ever get moldy? Yes, it does actually. And that is something that I've had to deal with. And like usually if a little sun, it depends how bad it is. Like if you leave it for a really long time, it'll probably just dry out. But I have sprayed, because I usually, to keep the sculpture wet and workable, I will spray it with water. So if I do see some mold growing, I will add like a tiny drop of bleach to that water, which, you know, not ideal to be working with and touching, but just a very little amount usually will kill the mold if you catch it early. Did I already miss the construction? Well, so for this guy, he has an armature inside of him, and basically the way I work, this guy's had several hours already put in, and I was going to demonstrate like with clay and this armature. Let me see if I can move this. Is it getting kind of dark where you can see? So, okay, so would you pour rubber over the bare head? So the mold making process is, it's a process, but you basically create a blanket of clay over this one, over your clay pattern, whatever it is. So you are kind of covering it and simplifying the form a bit with a blanket of clay. Then you build a plaster mother mold around that. Then you remove the plaster mother mold, and you're left with ideally a nice even rubber, or a nice even clay blanket, which you then remove, so you're left with a void where the clay blanket was, which will then allow you to pour the rubber into the mold, and that rubber will just flow where the plaster mother mold sits and your piece sits. So here's this again. So when I built this hand, this was the clay blanket, which you then take away, and you're left with a space which the rubber then pours into, because it's a two-part urethane rubber that I use, and then so it's a liquid. So when you pour it, it'll seep into all the areas and then cure, and then you take it apart and you have to cut the mold. There's a lot of considerations that go into mold making. Yeah, that's true, Chris. It is. It is a whole thing unto itself. But rubber blanket molds, you don't waste. Rubbers can be expensive, and so, you know, in this way, I'm kind of saving on materials. You can also do a box mold, so you can kind of see it's very thin. There's not a ton of rubber there. A box mold is another thing you can do where you're using just a box, and but that uses a bit more rubber, but it's it's simplified. This form, actually, the bear is not too complicated. Luckily, you know, that's actually, it's a good thing to think about, because I'm just wondering if you guys, if it's not light enough, it looks kind of dark, or there, that's a little better. So these areas where there's texture, you know, when I make the mold of this, when I'm sculpting it, I'm thinking about how that texture will translate in a mold. You just have to be thoughtful about that. But I do love texture, so for me that is a fun part. And actually with this guy, I've been experimenting with the way the fur looks. And yeah, so I'm like, you know, kind of working. That's actually a fun place for me. It's a little bit meditative to get really caught up. And I'll change it. That's kind of why I like working in clay, is because I can change it very quickly. Whereas other materials like wood or some more rigid materials are less forgiving. But clay, I can really move it around. So I was going to quickly demonstrate, like, it's not that exciting, but with the armature, so if I have an armature, it's basically providing structure, and, you know, the clay is going to stick to it. So, you know, you kind of want to push it on there. And there are various ways to work with the clay. I have some tools that I'll go through, but, you know, the beginning part is just about getting the clay on there. And you can see before, this clay is a little bit wet because you can see how it's sticking to my hands. But, you know, your hands just get very dry. But anyways, so I'll just work by adding, and I wind up using the heel of my hand to kind of get it in there. I've seen people kind of slap it with a piece of wood. There's various ways you can work the clay at this stage, but ultimately I try to work from like a broad form to the details. So like this eye and the things and the fur, I don't worry about for, you know, till I'm hours into the piece. Initially, it's just about getting the clay on the form so that it's like strong and can hold itself. And then once you kind of, you know, and this is kind of like I said, I think I said this earlier, that this will help support the clay that's a little bit farther from this main post. So it's helpful to have, and like putting this X here just gives it more surface area so that your clay is not going to plop off, because the weight of the clay, you know, if it's out far, wants to just fall down. So that's why it's important to have a good armature. So once you kind of have that established, I'm going to leave that for now. There's a range of tools that I like to use. And funny enough, let me just look at the questions. This makes me, oh good, yeah, working with clay is great. It's really forgiving, and I love it because you can experiment. And so for this guy, you know, I'll put something somewhere and then, no, it's not right, so I can move it, and like, I have to see it, you know, to know whether, what has to change. So, Amy Carter, if a mold as well. Okay. Chris is answering the question about an exact reproduction. That's a good, thanks Chris for answering that question. You know, I worked at a foundry, and so when you get the piece from clay to bronze, molds are pretty amazing, like the amount of texture you can get, but there are shifts that happen, and especially if it's a bigger piece and you're casting in sections, then those sections have to line up. But yeah, mold making, I mean, you can get exact replicas, and like all this texture, even in the eye, will come out. So it's pretty exciting to be able to do that. Okay, so the tools so this is kind of funny, but a tool I wind up using a lot is actually just this butter knife. And I think because it's pretty sturdy, but I wind up using this a lot, and it's got this nice curve, so I can get in the like point, you know, small, tighter places, or I can do broader strokes. Like I can come in and dig out this back part. I still have to work, but I can like really, let me make sure you can see, really dig out and scrape. You know, it's got a lot of ways that you can use it, and it's readily available, not too fancy. Then I also came across these, I think they're dental tools. Someone gave them to me, but these are really, you can see, it's a little blurry, I guess because it's too close, but this, for tiny things, like this is a nice tool to have to get those hard to reach spots. I also have these that I actually got initially for painting, to kind of move the paint around, but they are great. Oh, my little one's over there, but they're great. They're rubber. I don't know if you can kind of see, a little blurry, but they, you can get an edge, and it's really a nice, I like this tool because it's a little softer. Okay, not to seem lazy, but if you create a piece in clay, can the mold and plaster work be done for you somewhere? Yes. So there are foundries that usually will do mold making. Yeah, and Diane answered, they're great mold. A lot of great people can do this. So yeah, if you do just want to work in clay, and not deal with the rest of it, that is an option too. That's a funny question. I hear ya. The mold making, you have to like find a way to love it, I think. And I've more recently gotten into the giving myself enough time. It's only if I feel rushed that I start to resent the process. But if I give myself enough time, I can really try to love that process too, because it's like you're basically making another sculpture. So anyway, thanks for all the questions. It makes me feel like I'm with people. Okay, so that's a little bit about tools. I also have these that I also kind of like flexible, but for bigger, broader marks. I feel like I tend to think of the mark making on clay, it's a lot like drawing to me. So I think of those surfaces, and I think of my marks, trying to vary them. That to me is an interesting surface. So I was going to talk a little bit about, because I think it's important, the part of my process where like the research part. Oh, that's another head. But let's see if I can tilt this a little. So I was lucky, actually kind of exciting, the first Grizzlies showed up in Yellowstone, I think yesterday or recently. So I read that and I was like, oh, that's exciting and timely that I'm working on this. But obviously there are no Grizzlies in Philadelphia. So I always feel like if you can observe your subject in real life, it is very helpful just to see how they move and how their body works together. But because I'm in Philly and I don't have access to a Grizzly, I wind up doing a lot of research, and you know, it's helpful to me to look at a lot of pictures. So And there is something that I want, and I've noticed that not all grizzlies look alike. And so, you know, when I'm looking at the images that I'm finding, Google search images is a wonderful resource. But when I'm looking at them, there is like a quality that I'm looking for. And so I've made these selections based on that quality. And I also make sure to look at the skeletons. Oh, it's backward. The skull. I feel like skin and tissue hang over like an armature, the skeleton. So if I understand how the skull is, it helps me understand on the sculpture like where these parts go in and where the eye sits and how it sits on the head. So that to me is important. I'm not totally interested in hyper realism. I like the expression and moments where I depart from the like reality, but it is rooted, like making it is rooted in, or what's important to me is that it has a quality that I observe in reality. So that's why, hence the looking at these details. And yeah, so I also have this great book, but like I said, the issue is that not all grizzlies look alike. So it is kind of a selection process of which ones, what aspects I'm interested in. And yeah, the skulls definitely help translate. Because like I said, these images are all flat. And so to understand how the skin and fur sit on the subject, like to understand how that skull looks is important. So that's a little bit about the research that I do. And then, yeah, it's just a matter of putting in the time. And like I said, with clay, it's so flexible that you can move stuff around, you know. So like if I start this thing, like I decide that I don't like the way it's going, I can just shift it. And for me, that is an exciting part because it's like I'm discovering the piece as it happens. And additionally, I'll say that with this piece, it's finally a place, it's at a spot where I feel like, okay, it's getting there. But when I start something, there's a lot of the hours spent where you're like, oh, it's not there. So I just wanted to say that because I think sometimes we expect things to happen very quickly, and even though clay is very direct, there's still time spent adjusting and moving things around. Lila would like to know how you make clay smooth. Okay, that's a good question. So there's different ways. Some of the tools you use, your tool choice can make a difference. But as far as like a smooth, like what I was doing just to help me see the form, because sometimes if you have so much texture, it's a little hard to see the form. So what you can do is, this is water. It's water-based clay. So if I have these sponges, and if any of you are in the ceramic world, this is something you're often doing when you're working and firing clay, is using water and sponges. But a sponge can, let's see if I can, here. This is supposed to be a demonstration, so let's see. If I come here and I make a lot of texture, you know, that's pretty texture, right? So I can come in and I can just use my hand and smooth it around. I can also use the back of a tool. I'm hoping this is you're able to see it. If I should maybe move it closer. But, so you can, but you can see how it picks up the edges of my butter knife. Hopefully you can see that. So if I wanted to then come in, just adding a little water will kind of smooth that out for you. Yeah, so that's really your trick. It's all about the amount of water. You'll find if you start working with clay, you'll find that there's a sweet spot, you know, where it's like, oh, it moves great. It's feeling really where I want it. And it's tough to keep it in that exact place, because if you add water, of course, it's going to get a little sticky, and then, you know, you'll have to wait a little bit, or you can set up a fan or something. But that's how I would make it smooth. Again, it's you just experiment. But yes, smooth. Also, I will say that if you're working in clay and firing clay, you can sand it once it's dry. So now my hands are all like that. But if I were this guy who is dry already, I could sand him with some sandpaper, and it would just create a little bit of dust, which I then could recycle and make into clay again. So I really love how, you know, the clay I'm using for this guy has been clay that I used for several different sculptures. So I think that's kind of cool. But I think someone asked, do I also do any other animals? So yeah, I have, I have several pieces. This is another guy that, same process where I made him out of clay. And there's actually a video on my website if you are curious about that process of making him from start to finish. But he was cast in several different pieces, but he's hollow. So, because he's so large that it wouldn't make sense to cast him solid. But yeah, I do have, so animals are currently where I'm most attracted to, I think because of, here, I'll turn this around again. Just because I think it's interesting, we're animals, and but there's definitely a distance between us and wild animals. So I'm interested in that stuff. Website address. Oh, thanks, Chris. It is ColleenRudolf.com. So just my name, www.ColleenRudolf with an F.com. Oh, there it is. Thanks, you guys. Oh, thank you. I did, yeah, Diane, I did make a mold for the chimpanzee, and it was a big mold. How long do you have to work before it becomes too dry? So the clay, if you keep wetting it, you can keep working on it. I've worked on the chimpanzee, I think took me like a couple months. So I kept him, it's just a matter of covering them and keeping them moist. So as long as you're keeping it wet and you're keeping it covered when you're not working, a lot of times you can even, let me put this so I have my hands. There's, you know, so I'll just use plastic. This is actually the plastic that the clay comes in that I cut into sheets, and then I use, this is just an old pillowcase, but I usually put a wet fabric, which kind of helps keep it wet too. It depends how long you're going to leave it for. If you're working every day, then that's not really necessary. But if you're going to leave it for a week or so, then I would put another layer of moisture in there. So yes, and gruesome into cast plaster. Yeah, there is, they do take a long time. And there is, sculpture, I always feel like you just learn how important teamwork is. And, sometimes I'm here alone and trying to move something, and an extra set of hands is just really valuable. And I greatly appreciate when someone is willing to help me. So I feel like that's something as a sculptor you learn to support each other. So, but this head is actually a little more manageable, so I'll be able to do this stuff by myself. So I guess I think I'm like debating if I forgot anything. I mean, I was gonna show you guys. It's just hard. I need like a macro lens, but at this point, like now I'm playing. So I spent some of today like trying to understand how I want to describe the fur. I think I was talking about that up here. And if you're making a mold, you have to think about where the rubber is gonna seep into all of these crevices. So on the chimpanzee, there was a lot of texture. And that was a lot of work after, once it was cast in plaster, to go back in and kind of chase those lines and make sure that it was all where I wanted it to be. But the rubber mold does get all of those details, and even like these little. So the comments are like kind of blocking where I need to look, but you can make the tiniest little marks. And I think actually Diane mentioned that it'll pick up a fingerprint, so if I leave my fingerprint in there, and that actually, on one of my pieces, I saw it and I thought that was cool, but yeah, you can actually, it'll pick up the fingerprints. So it's a great way, you can really have fun with textures. Do I ever add texture after it's dry? So with the, if I were to work and fire these in a kiln, you could potentially work back in and after it's dry. With these, if the clay is dry, I'm in a bad spot because the rubber will stick to dry clay. You can like shellac it, I think, or seal it somehow, but it's really important not to let the clay dry out. After I've made the piece in whatever material it will wind up being, in plaster or bronze, then yes, I have gone in and added texture afterwards. So essentially when you're casting, you do wind up making the piece more than once, which, maybe it's not like you have a mold and then you're done. You still have to go in and chase the seams. And when I say seams, I mean when you have a mold and you have, I need to move this back. So when you have a mold, these two parts where they go together, you're gonna see the tiniest seam. If it's a good mold and a good fit, that seam will be pretty minimal. But so it just means that you have to go back in and in whatever final material you're using, just chase those seams so that it's not obvious where the two parts of, or three parts of the mold came together. It seems there are a number of different sculpting treatments for eyes and eyeballs. How do you like to indicate the eye shapes? Oh, thanks, Sharon. That's a great question. I've been thinking about that. So again, for me, this semester I'm teaching drawing from observation, and I feel like it's come up where often we think we see something, and so that's what we're like, oh, I know what that looks like, I'm going to draw it. But what I've noticed is we have to sometimes override what our brain thinks we're seeing. And so for eyes, I am trying to think of the lids and like how a lid will go. Let's see if we get over. You can kind of see it here, but what, you know, and I'm thinking about it in the terms of like what those actual shapes are. Like a sphere, an eyeball is a round thing, and the lid kind of goes on top of it. And then there's also another lid on the bottom. So I am looking at the bear, and I'm paying attention to how theirs sits. But, you know, it's constructed the same way as ours with a lid and a ball and stuff. But maybe your question is how sometimes there is... Here's a clay. This might be easier. Now I have to move this away. Okay. So, you know, and this is where these tools are kind of nice. So there's some, you know, you can kind of like describe, here's a sphere, right? I'm making a sphere, and then the lid sits like on top of that. Can you see this yet? And then I feel like I've noticed sometimes with sculptures what they do, because it reflects the light, and when you're trying to convey is that dark, the pupil and the iris. So that's a little blurry, but sometimes I've seen it where it's like a depression like this. If you actually, you know, the pupil is the hole. So if you make a hole, it's going to look dark. And this clay is a little wet, so it starts to stick. But that's kind of one approach. I mean, you can make an eye however you want. But if you're looking at the way eyes are, how they're built and the shapes that that's kind of... the approach. And then of course you have to deal with how the lids come together. And so, you know, this is kind of a rough take at it. But that's what I mean. I'll spend, you could spend many moments sculpting the perfect eye. But I think maybe that's what you were asking, because I know that that's been treated differently. And so getting that idea that there's a depression in there, like it's not actually depressed on our eyes, like it's still round, but if you put a depression in there, it kind of gives this sense that there's a iris and pupil happening. So that's like a quick, okay, good. I'm glad that was a good answer. Yeah, so that's kind of how I handled his eyes. I do, well, let me show you this actually. Here's another little human. So sometimes for fun, I sit there and I quickly just loosely, maybe it's like a counterbalance kind of, but this is a little head. And what I liked about this guy is like I recognized a person very quickly, but it's so loose and none of it is really you know, refined, but I kind of like that you can see a person in there. So that's something. Here's another, this is just another little head, and I was thinking about emotions, and like I pay a lot of attention to how little different like squints and then changes the way we read faces. That's interesting to me. And I do pay attention to that with the animals, and you know, how I represent them and like the feeling I get from them is intentional. And like, that's a choice that I'm making as I'm working. Is it different clay, or did you add some kind of color? Love the little head. Okay, so that's, yeah, I meant to mention this. There's so many different clay bodies that you can choose from. And It depends again if you're going to fire them. This is called B-Mix 5, and it's just a clay that I was working with, and I like the feel of it. But that's red clay, or I think it's called brick red, or there's, that's why it's that color. So yeah, the raw clay bodies do come in different colors. There's also porcelain that's white. But as far as if I'm just using it for a mold, like something I'm going to make a mold of, I'm not going to bother using a pricier clay, because if I, or you know, a clay that is, the finished product is not the clay. So, so that's why I just go with this. But yeah, I guess like sometimes if you prefer looking at it or you see it better, I know this guy is like kind of light and hard to see sometimes, but yeah, it just is a personal preference. Can you share a little bit about where your work is displayed or who buys your art? Nice. So well, currently, I have a piece up at the Wolf Conservation Center. And then there's some pieces in private collections. As far as where it's displayed right now, it's mostly in private collections or in my studio. I love public art, and I would love to have more work in public, but that comes with a lot of sort of considerations. So, and then who buys my art? A lot of different people. Yeah, I mean, they say to know your audience, and I have a hard time because I feel like there's a lot of different people that I've had good conversations with and who seem interested in what I'm doing. So, yeah, hopefully that answers that. Was there another question I missed? No, okay. So, yeah, I guess we're coming up on 5:45. So, thank you. Thanks you guys for being here and joining me. Hopefully I'll get to actually see your faces soon. And at June, hopefully, come out June 4th, 5th, and 6th. We'll be at the Rittenhouse Square. It's outside, and hopefully a sunny, nice day, or June usually is nice weather. So, so yeah, I think that hopefully I'll get to see you there, and if you can let me know that you saw this, because it's a little challenging. There's people who are talking, but it's hard to stay on track and read everything. So, thanks you guys. Thanks, and I'll see you guys soon, hopefully. And if you have any other questions I didn't answer, feel free to get in touch through my website or on Facebook, or, you know, wherever. There's so many different ways. Yeah, and thanks you guys for coming. Okay, and also if you want to look back at this for something you forgot about, or it'll be on YouTube, so you can always watch it again. And then you'll see this guy done, so you can see what he finally looks like in June. Okay, I'm gonna hit finish. See ya. Thanks, Renee. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Aw. So nice.